Jo Earl is an organisational psychologist, but a real expert when it comes to understanding retirement and planning and the impacts of superannuation on wellbeing. So she's going to talk to us today about using holistic advice to improve retirement planning. I'd like to plan my retirement, Jo. Yeah, I'm really keen to hear what you have to say.
Introduce me as the coolest psychologist.
Apparently, Jo would like to be introduced as the coolest psychologist I know. Here's Jo, the coolest psychologist I know.
Thanks, Rev. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for those people who are tuning in from home. I'm going to talk to you today about an ARC grant that I received last year in December, so pre-COVID. It's sponsored by Allianz Retire Plus, so they're my research partner. And I thought I'd talk to you about how it applies pre-COVID, but also post-COVID, and try to put it in the landscape that we're currently working in. There's two important things happening in superannuation and retirement at the moment. One of them is a retirement income review, so they're having a look at whether or not we need more super for the future. And the other thing is that ASIC's having a look to see whether or not we can provide more accessible advice to people in the community. So both of those things that are happening within the community impact on the type of research that I do and link back into it. Well, if you believed all the media hype, if you had 100,000 of these little babies, these jars of money, then you should expect to experience happiness in retirement. That's what most people would tell you. Unfortunately, it's not quite that simple, although I do concede that if you had a jar that was made of magical beans that also had beanstalks coming out of the top of them, you could be onto a game changer. But for most of us, just having money in jars, particularly in the garden for some reason, is not enough to secure a very successful retirement. What we do know is there are some things that we can work with while people are still working that will help to increase retirement adjustment. Now, one of those things is planning, so that's pre-planning and planning during retirement, so continuing to plan. Having some control over workplace exit, that's how and when you leave work. And I'm going to talk about that in the context of COVID in a minute, but also adequate resources and the accumulation of resources. So making sure that you've got enough money is important, it's one element, but equally important is health. So health and wealth are most important, social connections, motivation, ongoing motivation, emotional well-being and cognition, good cognitive resources. All of these things tend to play into good retirement adjustment. What do we mean when we talk about being adjusted to retirement? Essentially these things. Those people who are well adjusted to retirement will say that they enjoy being retired, they're busy, it's better than expected, they enjoy spending more time with their spouse or partner. And less of these things. So not having concerns about financial situation, not missing work, not looking back with regret about planning, not missing the discipline that work gave them, feeling that they still have respect in the community, not being worried about a big drop in their income, not missing being part of the action and living up to expectations. So we're really looking at retirement adjustment through that sort of lens, trying to promote a better experience for people that will result in less of all of those things that I've got listed up there. So we set about creating a project that involved a number of cross-disciplinary researchers, as well as an industry partner who we felt could promote the work and help to distribute it going forward. So these are the members of our team at Allianz Retire Plus. We're very fortunate to have the expertise of Jackie Lennon, and then we've got research partners at UNSW. Now, Chanaka is a geriatric psychiatrist. Anna Mooney was my PhD student, and her research was in retirement. And then we've got Paul Gerrans, who's an expert in finances. So this was a real multidisciplinary, multi-institutional project. So here's some basic premises, though, in terms of what we know about retirement and the way that we conceptualise it, because there are different definitions. But one thing we do know is that people will generally spend more time in retirement than thinking about it beforehand. A lot of people will leave it late or not do it at all. Right now, according to the ABS, there's about almost 1 million people in Australia who are working without a plan for retirement. Retirement's a career phase, so we see it as a continuation, not necessarily an ending. It's a process relating to repositioning the role of work rather than an event, because, you know, life doesn't stop when you have your retirement party. Retirement itself, we think, is best supported by holistic and multidisciplinary advice. There's been a preoccupation to date with money and how much money people need for retirement without having a look at that more holistic selection of resources that people need. So here are some things that we knew from the ABS pre-COVID about retirement planning, and this comes from the retirement intentions data. So about 500,000 people will plan to retire in the next 5 years. 55% of people over 55 were retired, and women generally retire sooner than men. On a more macro level though, the dependency ratio will double. That's the number of people compared to those working. So the number of people who are maybe relying on income from pensions, for example, versus the number of people working will double. And self-sufficiency is seen as one way of trying to deliver on the economic responsibility. And about 30% of people will still fail to adjust to retirement. Now, this was all pre-COVID. But I think the reason that the research still remains relevant is because what we're trying to do is to get people more engaged in the retirement planning process, so that if the landscape changes, and we've seen it change through the global financial crisis, for example, and now through COVID, then people can respond more quickly because they're already on top of what their options are. They've already been thinking through what they can do next. But the main reasons that people leave work, and this has been consistent with the ABS data for about the last 3 releases, is that they reach retirement age or they're eligible for superannuation. They essentially think they have enough money, but thinking you have enough money and actually having enough money appear to be 2 different things. Their own sickness, injury or disability, and being retrenched, dismissed or no work available. Now, I think during COVID, after COVID, we'll see those 3 things changing rank order, but I think those 3 things will still remain the most relevant. And 8% of women will leave work to care for someone versus 2% of men. So just in summary, about 1 person in 5 will leave work because of sickness or injury. 1 in 10 people were retrenched. This is all pre-COVID, dismissed or no work available. And then many people will leave because they think they've got enough money, but in fact, when we have a look at the data and we have a look at changes between one release of the data and the next, 143,500 people left work and then were back out looking for work. They retired, they considered themselves retiring, then they were back out looking for work because they'd run out of money or they got bored. Only 16% went back because of irresistible new opportunities. So superannuation is still the main source of income, but only about 17% of women can rely on their super and 30% of men. There's still a massive shortfall. So pension still dominates as the main reason income for men and women. And if you have a look at the retirement income review that the government's just completed, it seems that still pensions will feature into the future. Now, here's some more recent data that's come out from CPAR, which is the ARC Centre for Excellence in Population Ageing Research. And if you have a look here to the right-hand side of the graph, you'll see that there's a group there aged 60 to 69. Those are the people who are leaving work and then not going out looking for work again. So they're dropping out more readily. than other age groups, and some industries are worse affected than others, and they tend to be workforces that are reasonably manual, so mining, retail, manufacturing, people on their feet doing manual type work. So there's two groups of people that are potentially at risk. So what we're doing is adding back into this model the idea of career and getting people to be more cognizant about why it is they want to leave work, what's getting them to leave, what's making them think that this is the ideal time for them. And we don't believe that necessarily money is necessarily the main reason. It's the reason that they give, but it's also a reason for them copping out and feeling that it's just an easier, more palatable excuse to share with people than to say, I hate my job, or I'm fed up with what I do, or I'm just feeling like I'm not getting out of work what I needed anymore. So we think that that might be one of the reasons why. So how we're going to get at this is through a number of experimental manipulations, which I won't go into a lot of detail, but there are two important elements. Those groups who are exposed to all parts of the research will undertake online modules and also one-on-one advice. And they'll get advice from a careers advisor, and they'll also do online modules. Then they move on, they get a health assessment, and they do online modules about health, and then they go and see a financial advisor and a financial counsellor, and they do finance modules. So instead of them just fronting up at the counsellor, the financial advisor or financial counsellor, and saying, I want to retire at 65, what are my options? We're getting them to think through more thoroughly, why is it that they want to leave work at 65 or 60? Because it's not the financial advisor's job to interrogate them on that. They don't sit there and say, is that really the right thing for you? That's not their job. Their job is to do some financial modelling and help people to make best advice about their the management of their finances going forward. So we think that we can actually get people to make better, more informed decisions through this three-part process. So we do know a bit about what works when it comes to interventions. Multiple retirement topics helps, using self-reflection and storytelling, making sure we're using an evidence base. And we do know the difference between short-term and long-term projects in terms of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And also we know that by using online programs and telephone, we're able to reach large populations. So the project itself has not been affected by COVID. So there are psychological reasons why people give for leaving work, and these are just some of them. So when their colleagues leave work, that tends to prompt them to think about leaving. The organisational pressures to retire. They feel that there's subtle reasons that the organisation wants them out. There could be HR policies, even things like voluntary redundancies, family pull, job stress and job satisfaction. So we're getting people to, and we're putting in front of them these different scenarios. So here's one of them. This is for James, and this scenario represents job satisfaction. Now, we don't really care what advice they want to give James. It's not really relevant. What is relevant is that they're thinking about James's situation, and then we try to bring it back home to them. So this sort of works like a primer. And then we ask them these questions about their own job. So we get them to start thinking about what is it that's prompting their decision to leave work. And we've just run a small intervention, only with about 300 people, but on the basis of that, just exposing people to these different types of scenarios as questionnaires, we were able to get them to feel less certain about their retirement age and also more certain. So we saw some shifting, right? Now people would say, but don't you just want them all to be more certain? Not really, not if they haven't given it more thought. We want them to disrupt their thinking and to say, well, is that really the right thing for me? Perhaps I should go out and investigate. Perhaps there's more to still know. And in terms of their retirement age, some people changed to, some people changed to earlier, some people changed to later. So at the beginning of the experiment, we said, when are you going to leave work? We got them to go through the intervention. At the end of them, we said, now, when do you think you might leave work? So only a small percentage of the sample changed. 6% said earlier, 11% a bit later. But the most important thing is that previous slide, in that we're getting to start to question, is that the best option for them? And that's where we're up to at the moment. Now, people always ask me, what's your retirement plan? Well, I'm pleased to advise that I've had a good look at all the retirement images. There are apparently a lot of unattended deck chairs on the beach, and there's a lot of jars of money out in the garden. So my retirement plan is I'm going to buy a ute. I'm going to look for those jars of monies in people's gardens, and I'm going to collect all the chairs that I can find and sell them on eBay. And if anyone wants to join me, let me know. Thank you. Any questions? Don't ask me when should I retire. How much money do I need to retire? Pierce?
Obviously, money is important.
Yep.
And I was interested to see that was 35% of people go back to work because they're bored in retirement. And you mentioned that it's not just about, although that is important, all sorts of other holistic plans you need to make or to planning. You look at those other sorts of.
So you could think about that, that plan that we had, you know, that resources model I showed you. When I encourage people, because sometimes I'll do individual counselling, mainly with senior executives who've done nothing but work their whole life. And now they're saying to themselves, my family wants me to retire, but what in the hell should I do? Because I've been at work all the time. So we encourage people to do planning in those different domains. So something to keep themselves well, you know, like in terms of health, socially, like who are they going to be connecting with? Who will they be able to spend time with? What sort of goals do they want to still keep setting? How will they keep themselves emotionally well? And what do they want to still learn, know and develop? We've sort of used this model in an article that should be coming out in the next few days in the Medical Journal of Australia, where we've talked about doctors and their on-call careers. So I think trying to make sure that we can get people to think more holistically about those different areas to plan and not just focusing only on the money. One of the things that's really important that's just come out of the retirement income review is housing, where people live in terms of it being an asset, but also, you know, what communities will they be living in, who will they be connecting with? Yeah.
Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. I was wondering, there's emerging evidence for going back to uni to prevent dementia. What do you have any counselling around how people extend themselves cognitively in retirement?
Yeah.
And there's one thing to take up, you know, bowls or whatever. There's another thing going back to uni.
That's right. Interestingly enough, working with doctors has stimulated interesting discussions about that. And one of the most interesting examples I've seen is the Creative Doctors Network. So a whole lot of doctors have gotten together, some of them retired, some of them not, and they do things that are creative. So there's people that play the bagpipes, there's sculptors, there's people who write short stories, people that sing, people that are magicians. And they all get together and they share, you know, what they know and they see it as a very important part of their identity, to the point where I did some videos with one of the doctors who's also one of the top ophthalmologists in New South Wales. And I said to him, Michael, what should I put your title down as? And he said, ophthalmologist and magician. So I think you can encourage people to look more broadly at what their interests are. And unfortunately, though, only about 20 people will take up new hobbies in retirement. It's actually less than that. It works out to, about 20%, I think. So for every 5 people who say that they're going to play golf, only 1 person shows up. And it's like that with a lot of activities. So I think if we could try people to think about the things that they have, they're interested in while they're still working, that will help when they retire, it won't be such a difficult transition.
We've got one from Sue Ferguson. What sort of content is in your health module?
In the what module?
In your health module.
In a health module. Chanika's helping us to design the content of that because he's the doctor. Part of it's about assessment and testing, so being aware of what to be cognizant of, but it's also helping them to see how they might integrate that information into making changes to their own health behaviours. So we've been trying to get people to be more cognizant of the things that they should be monitoring and then the changes that they can make, particularly while they're still working, because if they can get on top of those health issues, that could potentially give them more longevity and less likely to force them out. So anything that will basically prolong their workplace longevity.